Hello! Today we are talking about executive functioning. Executive functioning is the concept that humans have certain skills in an area that is called executive functioning, and that those skills can be kind of quantified by looking at how well we do them. And you may ask, well, what is executive functioning? So executive functioning is kind of the way that we function in areas where, like the day-to-day administerial, I'm gonna say administerial because I can't remember the other word, ways of being. So like returning phone calls and starting a new project, remembering to be somewhere at a certain time, remembering belongings that we need for a task, getting paperwork done. These would all be considered executive functioning tasks, or skills. And these are skills that are often needed in work environments or school environments, or even like maintaining things. So like if we think about maintaining a home, or maintaining a job, or even sometimes maintaining a relationship, or maintaining a membership somewhere. It's like, these are the things that if you didn't do them, you might get fired, right? Or you might get evicted. Cleaning regularly would be an executive functioning skill. And many of these things are seen by neurodivergent people, and maybe all humans have a tendency towards feeling that these are kind of mundane tasks, but they're actually more difficult for many neurodivergent people. And that would include, kind of the broad spectrum of neurodivergent minds. So if you've had traumatic brain injury, or you have dyslexia, or you have trauma, the way the brain works is going to be impacted, and it may impact your ability to use these executive functioning skills. Now, as I always say, you're probably tired of me saying this, that you've met one autistic, and so for example, with me, when it comes to task initiation, I can often start a writing project quite easily. That's a pretty easy thing for me to initiate, but figuring out how to fill out forms online can often be really difficult for me. And so you'll see that with autistic people. Obviously, there are those of us who are secretaries, and in the workforce, one of us, well, if there's a secretary, he might be able to do that really well at home, but still have some difficulty with executive functioning elsewhere. Autistics and ADHDers are often run into trouble with executive functioning when it comes to school and workplace, if they are not accommodated, or if, like, for example, the workplace is not one that fits their executive functioning. So and maybe sometimes those skills can be in one person. So for example, when I was younger, I would waitress, and I would wait tables, and there were parts of that I was very good at, like the repetitive stuff, working with people, the routine of taking an order, bringing food, bringing the check. That was all quite doable for me for the most part, after I'd been trained for a while. But I always really struggled with, if I was interrupted from the routine, or making sure that I did the money part of of being a wait staff, well, that was a harder thing for me. So some examples of executive functioning, and you can kind of be thinking about if these might relate to you, are working memory. So working memory is what memory we have to work with at any moment. So like, if you need to remember the address that you're going to, how easily can you pull that up? If somebody asks you what the name of that person was that you met a week ago, how easy is that for you to bring up? It's kind of like the memory that you have to work with versus the memories that are just initiated by the brain. Like a memory that would be just initiated by my system would be like, maybe I smell something and suddenly I think about my mom, right? That wouldn't necessarily be considered working memory because it's an automatic response rather than something that I'm going digging for in my brain. Time management, ADHDers and autistic people sometimes struggle with time management. Those of us who are ADHD, which is autistic and ADHD, may have more trouble with many of these executive functioning pieces. So if you're purely autistic, you may find yourself saying, I don't have some of these issues. Planning, self-control, attention, emotional regulation, self-monitoring, new task initiation, set shifting, which is like being able to change from one task to the next, language generation. Many autistic people are not reliable speakers or will lose words. Prioritization, so being able to prioritize what you're doing next, or prioritizing different tasks within a day. I sometimes struggle with this because I'm so fascinated and so interested in many subjects, but then I may not prioritize like taking a shower. Yeah, so those are some of the examples of executive functioning. And if you're interested in what any of those mean, feel free to leave a comment down below. And also, if you could also Google like what are all of the executive functioning skills, because there's a lot of different ones, and sometimes you'll Google and they'll be like the top 5. But if you look around, do a more extensive search, you'll find that there's probably 100 different skills or ways of describing what is needed to function best in executive functioning ways. I love recommending that we personally learn how to ask for accommodations around our executive functioning issues, which requires us knowing what they are first and being able to talk about them, and then working them into like IEPs, which is the school system, or workplace initiatives or work meetings, saying like, hey, these are my strengths, these are areas that I struggle with, and doing that in families as well. Something that has to do with executive functioning is PDA, which is an autistic thing. I mean, it's highly correlated with being autistic, and the more medical model definition is pathological demand avoidance, and more PDAers have changed it to persistent desire for autonomy. And it's just when these people who are PDA will be confronted or told that they need to do a certain thing, like it's a demand, and it feels like their bodies just won't do it. It's like there's something inside of them that shuts down when something is suggested as a demand. And so there are ways for both PDAers to recognize that and get their needs met, and for the people in their lives. So like if I'm working with a PDAer, I'm going to be way more likely to be like, would you like this option or this option or this option? Rather than being like, you must do this. Because I know that that can just cause shutdown for them. Whenever I talk about executive functioning, and I like to also bring up human rights, because I think that it's important that we recognize that autistic people oftentimes have real basic needs for accommodation. We often have really low foundational skills in certain areas, and that it is a human right of ours to receive accommodation. So I kind of feel like all people should get up to date on what human rights are, and then secondly, kind of looking at, okay, how does the need for basic human rights relate to providing appropriate accommodations to autistic people. As we've talked about before, autists often have a spiky profile, which means that we have, if you were to look at our skills, some areas would be super high and then some areas would be super low. We tend to do better at executive functioning if we can just do one task for a set amount of time without being interrupted, and then we get to choose to move on to the next task. Getting interrupted can be really chaos inducing for autistic people. If I'm doing the dishes, I kind of want to just like set a timer and do a specific amount of dishes until either the timer has gone off until I'm done. I don't like to do some dishes, go do something else and come back. And that can be different if you're ADHD. Some ADHDers who are also autistic may need more novelty and changing up from one thing to the next. Autistic people tend to be able to think better when there is not visual clutter, and yet many of us are maximalists by nature, where we just collect, we penguin pebble, which is like bring things home. We're like, oh, this is really neat, I'm bringing this home, or I have collections, or this person would love this, or I can't let that go because it would hurt its feelings. And so then the house can become cluttered. But many autistic people will find that they can think better, or they feel better in a more minimalist home environment. Not always home, but environment. We do really well with routine when it comes to executive functioning. So, for example, for me, if I always put my keys in the same place, that gives me a sense of comfort and security, and it also helps me to keep from losing them. So I think that's kind of all of the stuff that I wanted to really touch on around executive functioning. And yeah, let me know what you think. Okay, have a great day. Bye.